So we tried it, but things kind of blew up that way.
I guess from my point of view,
sounds like yours was worse.
Well, it was a live event rather than a virtual event, but it would have been a problem either way. I guess, and John, you might want to chime in on this as well, because I guess this is kind of your wheelhouse. But if it was me, I probably would have switched to hard caps for distribution. So if whatever I was doing, sort of to begin to the front end of the pipeline, once they get split up and sent out to the various distribution networks, whether it be YouTube or Facebook or wherever, Twitch, what have you, other services are available, rather than tripping up over those kinds of problems, I probably would have reached for something which would made them hard caps at that point, so they're part of the stream.
Actually, I was just going to ask a Vox Pop, how apart from Keith, who I know was there, how many people attended this year's SF Worldcon, Con Zealand? Anybody? Okay. Well, that was massive amounts of cutting down the jungle, because we virtualized the convention from a standing start without any idea how many people were going to be there, without any idea what were the right tools, with a whole heap of requirements. So part of what I'm here for is to find out what is state of the art. Gee, it's 7 months later since I started virtualizing Con Zealand. And that ended up being 2,000 people and about 20 parallel tracks of programming and major events and And we had some very important requirements on captioning, some of which we delivered, some of which we couldn't.
This is Maria, New York. One of the large issues we had at Dublin Worldcon was our captioning, and some of the interpretation got misinterpreted, and it created huge problems. And I know that during Con Zealand, a lot of those issues were fixed, and I hope that for DC next year, which is most likely going to be a hybrid convention, we can work on those again. And one of my areas is actually working on audio translations, real-time audio, and closed captioning and translation services for the con for next year. Just saying.
Well, here's a dirty little secret. One of the tricks up your sleeve for getting captions to work correctly is don't do them. If you have an option to not do them, they will be 100% right 100% of the time.
It's actually something that we've...
So in asking, not captioning at all and just maybe using an interpreter?
There's a company I know of that does interpretations specifically for Zoom call type things. My wife actually just got interviewed by that company, but like, it's the only reason I found out they existed. But yeah, so they do ASL and other ones. They do Spanish language as well, I believe. But yeah, so it's like a add-on service you can put into a thing, but you can add it into your conference package to have live interpreters.
I know that at San Jose and in DC next year, there's actually a physical human on staff to do interpretations, captioning, I should say, my bad. And we're probably not going to use any type of programming, but it's the translation, since we're going to most likely be, I mean, it is a world con. And this time it'll be easy for people all over the world to come, I think.
So when you say translation, do you mean from one language into another or from one format into another?
So I use it for both, and so I should clarify. Translation being from speech to visual, or one medium to another, and then there's the translation for language. So
yeah.
Okay. It's 9:55, so I'm going to end this meeting so the recording resets, and just log in back in a minute.
Bye.
Jay, you can just stop the recording.
Yeah, you can just stop the recording, Jay.
Oh, and then it makes
Yes.
a brand new recording?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And make sure you hit stop and not pause.
Okay.
You have to go
Glad
for McDonald's.
Okay, good. So,
Yeah.
great. That solves one problem.
You can stay.
It doesn't solve another problem though, which is I attended a 3-day virtualized convention last week, getting up at much the same stupid times because it was run out of New York. And it doesn't solve the problem of you need to allow people time to get up, run to the toilet, and get back.
Well, yeah, I got 5 minutes between sessions at least.
We typically have done, and bouncing off what John just said, we typically do either 2 or 3 full day, 8-hour days, and we were running 2 15-minute breaks a day, and the complaint was the breaks weren't long enough at 15 minutes.
Correct. That won't be.
So especially if you're, doing it across a global time range, we were starting at 11 so that our LA people wouldn't have to get up at the crack of dawn. And starting at 11, it's an interesting time for the East Coasters because it's right before lunch. So, just plan accordingly, based on what your time zones look like, and you can typically figure it out.
Good morning from Sydney, where it's coming up to 5 a.m.
Exactly.
I have no sympathy. Or Keith, who is in London.
Oh, there's particular occasion disabilities here for me.
I was going to say we had in our high holiday services, which on Yom Kippur is a full day, and normally people are there and they choose when they want to come in and out of hearing the service, and there's not scheduled breaks as much normally, and we went digital, we went online this year, so we built in like those 15-minute breaks, but left the Zoom room open, had a picture, played some music, just so people got the idea that they can. And in our promotion of it, we said that you can come in and out as needed. But what I learned the other day is even though you try to educate people that they can turn off their camera, older members might not remember that. And we had an interviewer that muted her mic but took her iPad with her into the bathroom. Thank God Speaker View did not record that. And we were kind of wondering why she was going into that room until she kind of flipped her skirt up a little bit. Thankfully, not recorded. So I think sometimes it's the education that people who aren't normally online need for. You can close your camera. You can take your own break when needed.
Let me tell you, there's nothing more amusing. Good morning or good afternoon. Let me tell you, there's nothing more amusing when the public TV pledge host or something like that with their wireless mic walks into the loo without muting it. Now, the sound operator should be muting it, but that doesn't mean they won't be listening to it.
I don't know. I think having a Yom Kippur service and somebody going off for a meal break, that could be annoying.
Votes a reform synagogue. So
it wasn't necessarily a meal break. There are parents that are taking care of kids and things like that, or bathroom breaks. Just
bathroom breaks are fine.
That you can go away from your screen. Or take that break to walk around, but it was both building in, what we felt was a sufficient break time for people to get up and stretch or take care of themselves or others, and then letting people know that you can close your camera and no one will see you.
Okay, it's time for Rachel Livermore's presentation. Yeah, she did the Ineffable Con, and just turn it over to her.
Okay. All right. Oh, could you enable participant screen sharing, please?
Oh, sorry. Participant, I thought, well, that's...
Rachel, how do I pronounce your last name?
Livermore.
Livermore.
There we go. Got it. Okay, so hello. Very happy to be opening this with my experience running the Ineffable Con 2, which was last month. We used a platform called Excel Events, so that is what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to be mostly talking about like general things to look for when looking for platforms, things that we really liked, things we didn't like, rather than that specific product, because I think after watching this talk, no one here is going to use Excel Events. So I am Rachel Livermore. My real life background is in science. I just run conventions for fun. So like a lot of people here, I do science fiction and fantasy things. I focus on the very niche, like single fandom events. So that's what this one is. This was a Good Omens convention, just started last year. And this was our very second one. And we had to figure out how to go online. So same problems a lot of people here have had. So a little bit about me, because I think I only know one person on this call. So this is me dressed as War. If you're not familiar with Good Omens, that's one of the 4 horse people of the apocalypse. I've chaired 6 conventions now, and this was my first one online. I used to be treasurer of the Tolkien Society. That's how I got into con running in the first place. I've also worked as staff on various conventions of different types, from a few hundred to a few thousand people. Of the ones I've chaired, like I said, I focus on the really niche single fandom, so they tend to be smaller. The largest one I chaired was 537 people in real life. This one that we did online was 661 people. So very first time going online, and the largest one I'd ever done as chair. So that was scary. All non-profit, all run by volunteers. So a lot of the same problems that are faced by other fan conventions and other low budget things. One thing about having run kind of these small single fandom things is I've become used to working with very small committees. And when I say small, I mean 2 people. There was only one other person on this committee, which was my co-chair, Bethany, who is in the room and can hear you. She had only ever been to one convention before, which was the Ineffable Con last year, which is where she met me. Now she's stuck living with me. She does organize events professionally, though. However, she asked me to say that she is not at all tech savvy. So this was important when we were looking into platforms and things, that we needed things that were very easy to use. She mostly dealt with the social media and customer service side, which is the bit that I cannot do. So that was great. So the event, to give you an idea of the kind of requirements we had, this was following an in-person convention last year, which was much smaller. We launched in May 2020, so we did have the advantage that we knew from the get-go we were going to be virtual. We didn't have to pivot an existing event with an existing budget. It was from Friday the 16th to Sunday the 18th of October, so right about a month ago. We ended up charging £25 per ticket. We did have a financial assistance scheme, which I'll mention in a bit later. We used the Excel Events platform, which I'm going to talk about, and we ended up with 661 registrations, and it hurts my soul that we couldn't get 5 more. That would have been really great. So what we were looking for in a platform, we had run some virtual events like parties previously. We actually had a physical party planned for the 2nd of May for the 30th anniversary of Good Omens, which we pivoted to Zoom. So we knew that we did not want to do it on Zoom. I am going to talk a bit about Zoom later on. We had 500 people at that party on the 2nd of May. This was before Zoom brought in the function to allow people to move freely between breakout rooms. So we had to do all of the moving. And then eventually you get to a point where you just have to make everyone a co-host so they can move. And it was a nightmare. It worked, but we wanted to die afterwards. So we did not want that. We knew that we had an audience that was much bigger than you would have for an in-person event, because it's a worldwide fandom. It's very niche, so people don't have an equivalent thing locally they can go to. So that gives us a time zone issue. So we knew that we wanted live talks and panels, obviously, like any event. But we wanted the recordings to be available on demand with minimal work required from us. So that people in other time zones, we're based in the UK, we had obviously lots of people from Europe, huge contingent from the US and South America, but also massive contingent from the Philippines randomly, also Japan, Australia, New Zealand, so every time zone imaginable. So we wanted people to be able to watch things on their own schedule. We wanted exhibitor booths at our physical conventions. We tend to have art shows, dealers' rooms, so we wanted to be able to replicate that as much as possible. But our events are primarily social. They're mostly about hanging out with like-minded people and chatting, so we wanted to be able to replicate that as much as we could. We were also interested in accessibility, which I'm going to talk about in more detail. But of course, we're on a budget, which I'm also going to talk about in a bit more detail. And we wanted something that was very easy to use. There were only 2 of us. One of us is not very tech savvy. I can code, but we had no time. We launched in May. The event was in October. I didn't have time to write something from scratch. So accessibility, this is obviously a thing that any event organizer thinks about, but it's different online. Rather than thinking about wheelchair ramps and accessible bathrooms, you're thinking about mostly deaf, hard of hearing people. So this brings me on to subtitles, which we were chatting about a bit earlier. I very quickly found out that none of the platforms, certainly within our price bracket, have figured out live closed captions. There's just not an option. The only way you can get live closed captions meaning you can switch them on and off, is by going via YouTube, which doesn't work. You can't put YouTube videos behind a paywall. It's against their terms of service. And it's also not possible to hide the direct YouTube link, even if it's unlisted. Anyone can post that on social media and then your paywall's gone. So the best option we could come up with was to use open captions, that is hard-coded on the video within Zoom. There are some services that provide automated captions in Zoom, but if you're just using Zoom for your speakers and then you're streaming to an outside platform, all of these live closed caption services use the RTMP stream. You can only have one RTMP stream from a Zoom call, so you can't do that. You can do fancy things where you set up it going via a third-party bit of software. Like I said, there were 2 of us, and we were running 2 parallel streams constantly all day. That wasn't an option. We needed something easy. The thing with captions being hard-coded is they really have to be good. So I'd say even if we had found an automated caption system that would work, I would be really wary of it. We've all seen events where the entire event gets derailed by people laughing at how bad the captions are. We did do a test with 3Play Media's automated captions while we were considering that as an option. And I don't remember what I was talking about. I think I was just having a general discussion about technicalities of streaming from Zoom. These captions were obsessed with Dick Cheney. He came up like 3 times within one paragraph, and I have no idea why. If that had been a live event, people would have been laughing about Dick Cheney and not listening to what I was saying. So if you're going to have open captions, they got to be good. So we used live human captioners. This was an education. I've never done this before. I learned that there are 2 types of live human captioners. There are what they call re-speakers, who just re-speak everything that you say into another microphone. They're obviously trained to speak very clearly and they say the punctuation and everything, but it's still ultimately an AI that translates that into words. So it's not great for names and all that sort of thing. The other option is the human stenographers. So this is like court reporters. It's usually what they train as, who are typing on a stenography machine. That's what we wanted. So we went with MyClearText. Other companies are available. This is a UK-based one, which was important to us because of the time zones. You're looking for most of these companies at starting rates of £200 an hour, or a bit over $200 an hour. So this is expensive for a low budget event. So for both cost reasons and the personnel reasons, because for this we were going to have to use Zoom and stream to a platform, which means starting a Zoom call, getting everyone on, starting the captioning, starting the streaming. We decided to only do this for special guests. So we had 8 panels who were special guests. This is what it looks like. So this is one of our special guest panels with Neil Gaiman, Douglas McKinnon, and Rob Wilkins. And the captions show up like this. So you have them come up in your Zoom. People within Zoom can switch them on and off, but then when you're streaming, they're just hard-coded on the video. So that's how we did that. All of our other panels, anyone who wasn't a special guest, did not have captions live. We then had volunteers transcribing them afterwards. So we used an automated system called Otter to provide a first draft transcript, and then we had humans go in, edit it, fix all the silly mistakes, and then we added the subtitles to the recorded videos afterwards. So not ideal, and I think this is the biggest thing that I would really like to be able to fix in future. There is another side to the accessibility coin, which is financial accessibility. So we realized early on that obviously, whenever you run an event, there are always people who would like to come to your event but have financial hardship for whatever reason, but more so than ever in 2020. There are a lot more people who've suddenly lost their jobs. But also opening up to the world, we realized that £25, which was where we set our ticket price, is small change to someone who's used to attending a physical event, especially if you're not thinking about travel and hotels. But if you sell that in like parts of Central and South America, Thailand, Philippines, this is suddenly an awful lot of money, even to someone who has a decent job. So we wanted those people to be able to come. We figured this is supposed to be a fun event. 2020 has sucked enough without people feeling shut out of something, and we wanted to help. But the platform we went with charges per person. So we didn't have the option to just say, all right, costs are covered, everyone else come on in. So what we did is we set up a system where people who could donate. We matched all the donations, so essentially charged 50% for the ticket price, and then anyone who needed to could apply. We did this on the honor system, which is the way that fan conventions are generally leaning. We don't want to be asking for proof of unemployment and all that nonsense. The general system is if you feel like you need it, then you can have it. The only information we required from people was a contact email, so we could send them information on how to register. We managed to raise £874 from that. People were really, really generous. And so we got 64 people able to come who wouldn't otherwise have been able to, which was really great. So the really great thing about this was it made the convention accessible. People who got free spots then wanted to give something back, so they were more likely to volunteer at the event, which was great. And it's, good PR because we were visibly trying to help people attend. Concerns, we did have a worry that people would take advantage. That's always a worry when you do anything on an honor system, but we were particularly worried because being a virtual event, you don't necessarily have the sense of community and kind of social peer pressure you might have at a physical event. And obviously there's a limit to the funding. As it happened, we were able to fund everyone who applied, which was great. I do feel like there were some people who maybe took advantage of us. We only had over the entire event 3 people who didn't show up to something they were supposed to do, and they were all on these free tickets. So we did wonder if maybe they didn't feel as invested. But then on the flip side, we had a number of people who applied for these free tickets who then dived in, they were on panels, they volunteered, they ran games. And I think I wouldn't want to sacrifice that in order to prevent the bad side. So I think overall it was worth it. A brief thing about budget. I'm whizzing through this because I have so much. So I'm going for the kind of surface level, everything, get some talking points, and then we can discuss it offline afterwards. So generally the problem that fan conventions have is it's a social event. Work is not paying for it. So you can't price it as high as a corporate event. You can't charge hundreds. Well, Worldcon can. Other conventions can't charge hundreds for their tickets. It's non-profit, so we're not looking to make money, we just need to cover our expenses. But it's really difficult to budget when you have no idea how many people are going to show up. Because this was our first time going virtual, we kind of had this inkling because of the party we'd run in the spring that a lot of people might come, but of course that was free, this wasn't, so we weren't really sure. And how do you budget for anything when this is your registration curve? So we had to base all of our costs on that first peak at the end of May, which was when we launched. That first night, we got almost all of the registrations we would see for the next few months. And then a massive flood in the last couple of weeks, including people registering during the event. And at that point, you're like, well, welcome, but I can't do anything with your money. So it's a nightmare. It was really difficult to do. It did help that we ended up going with a platform that charged per person. So our fixed costs were not very high. But the problem with all these people registering last minute is because we were having to be cautious, it's our own money on the line, we ended up with way more surplus than we would have planned for, which is great. We're donating all that to charity. It's going to Alzheimer's Research UK in memory of Sir Terry Pratchett, about £10,000 from this one event, which is quite nice. So the options we looked at, I think this is probably what people are most interested in. We were looking for a platform that would be as easy to use as possible, that would have all the features we wanted. So these are the features. It needs to be within our budget. We need to be able to have social space. We need to be able to talk some panels that will be available recorded afterwards, and we need exhibitor booths. So the first one is the name everyone's heard of, VFairs. We noped out of that phone call within about 30 seconds as soon as they gave us their prices. If you have tens of thousands of pounds/dollars to blow, by all means. Having been to a VFairs event now, or seen one that Bethany was at, I wouldn't necessarily say it was money well spent, but they have at least been in the market for a while and presumably everything works. Not an option for us though. Same with Hopin. They're actually pretty reasonably priced if you're just doing a one-day event. As soon as you go over 24 hours, it's suddenly way outside of our budget. You have to go for their Super Pro membership, which is like 18,000 a year or something. vConference Online were really annoying. They make you sit through a webinar before you get their pricing document. So that was $14,000, I believe, also outside of our budget. Would have done everything if we had that kind of money. So the next one I went to was Run the World. This was a new startup, just started in February, based in Silicon Valley, I believe. Very reasonably priced. They have a percentage option, which for a nonprofit, I think was 15% of our ticket prices, but they were very new. So they basically only had the talks and panels set up. They didn't have exhibitor booths, and there wasn't really any way to integrate social spaces. I am going to add the massive caveat that I was interviewing platforms in April and May, and a lot of these have developed hugely since then. So this might not still be true. The next one I tried was Nunify, which I believe was based in India. They were really nice, set up a meeting, did a full demo of the platform, reasonably priced, had most of the features. The warning bell for me was that if you have more than one speaker in a session, you can't share your screen. So that was a deal breaker. SpotMe was a bit of a weird platform. They're a social media platform that has added virtual events as a bit of an afterthought. They kind of rubbed me up the wrong way by starting, this is just a one-on-one meeting. They said, what kind of event are you running? I told them and made very clear it's social, it's not at all corporate. And they went full in on all the corporate spiel. So that kind of pissed me off. They were, how much were they? I want to say £6,000. So at the time, that was too much for us. We ended up spending that. But at the time, we had no idea how many people we were going to have. And in order to hedge, we would have had to set our ticket price way too high. So we did not go with that. Brella is a weird one. They're based, I forget, I want to say Scandinavia. I'm going to say Sweden or Finland, can't remember, sorry. They were very reasonably priced, but they don't actually host any content on their servers. They just provide the kind of website setup, and then you embed videos from YouTube. This wasn't really an option for us because as I said, you can't put YouTube videos behind a paywall, and we needed to charge to cover all these other costs. Also, the exhibitor booths, they do have them, but you have to send all the information for the booth to them rather than have exhibitors set them up themselves, and that just seemed like an awful lot of hassle. So that finally brings me to Excel events, and I'm kind of cringing now as I look at this, because even with the benefit of hindsight, it was the right choice. They were the only one who ticked all our boxes, but I'm going to go on to some huge caveats here. They were very reasonably priced. It's 20% of the ticket price, or $3 per person per day. So we were a 3-day event, so effectively $9 per person. It's the higher of the two of those. They have all the talks and panels. They have a variety of different streaming methods, which I'm going to talk about. They had all the exhibitor booths, which exhibitors could set up themselves. They had social spaces, but this is all in theory. This is what they demoed to me. What we got is an entirely different thing. So Excel Events is the platform we went with. It was the only one within our budget that at the time I was looking in May could do everything we wanted to do. It was originally designed as a fundraising system. So the first thing you do when you're about to choose a platform that you're going to spend thousands of pounds with is you go looking for reviews. All of the reviews were about their fundraising platform. They do like a electronic thing for doing live auctions and raffles and that sort of thing. And that seems to work fine, but there were no reviews at all of their virtual events platform because it was that new. There are now. Turns out the reason they had all these features is that they rushed them out really quickly at the start of the pandemic with no testing, and it was incredibly buggy. So many bugs and really poor customer service. I'd say the thing that characterized our relationship with Excel Events the most is we would report a bug, which any other tech company would say, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. They get defensive and their immediate response is deny, deny, deny. So they'll tell you that you imagined it, that you're faking it, anything to avoid acknowledging that they have a problem. I ended up losing my temper several times. It was so frustrating. We did run a successful event with them, and I hope that a lot of the issues we encountered were not visible to people who attended the event, but I really cannot overstate how much work it was and how much it almost destroyed us to make this event happen in a way that we wanted it to. So I'm going to give you a brief tour of the Excel event system. This is really just to highlight things you should look for in another platform. I'm going to put great big labels on everything I say. Don't use this platform. It was a nightmare. Maybe in a year, if they fix all the bugs, maybe, but not right now. So this is where you set up your event. It's all very simple. So this is what we were looking for, right? You put in the name of the event, when it starts and ends, what kinds of sessions you want. I'm going to talk about that in a bit because that's actually not obvious. You set up a logo and then everything works. You can set up your event website. So you have a web page within Excel Events that acts as like a front page for people visiting. If you don't have your own website, you can change the color scheme, add pictures, whatever you want. It automatically fills in your program once you make a sessions visible. And then you can set up the virtual event hub. So this is the site people go to when they're actually attending the event. You can have a welcome message pop up. I decided that would be really annoying, so that's why that's all blank. I didn't do that. But you can have, there's a feed in the lobby, which I'm going to show you. You can set that so that attendees can't post in it, which means you're using it as a bulletin board. You can put links in the sidebar and everything. So that's all very easy to set up. This is what it looks like on the front end. This is the website people go to. You have a join now button, which lets them register, and then enter event to actually get into the event once they've registered. One thing that's a bit weird, I took this screen cap just today or yesterday, so obviously our event's already happened. If your event is more than 30 minutes in the future, you don't get the enter event button. But the way they've coded it is kind of backwards. So instead of saying, if less than 30 minutes, show button, they've said, if more than 30 minutes, hide button. So when you first load the page, the enter event button shows up for like a second and then it vanishes. So we had, an hour or so before our event, people were going to this page, seeing this enter event button that appears and then vanishes, and then emailing us in a panic saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why can't I get in? And that took up a huge amount of our time on the first day of our event when we're trying to get things ready. We're answering all these queries. Don't worry, it will show up when there's 30 minutes to go. And so like just before our event started, I had to be editing our website to put this notice everywhere saying, don't worry, the button will be there when there's 30 minutes to go. It was a bit of a nightmare. This is the virtual event hub. So when people enter your event, this is what they see. You have some tabs here in the lobby. The feed is kind of like Facebook posts, but with no comments. So we use that as a bulletin board to alert people to any changes or links or anything. The full program is available there. There's an info desk where you can add FAQs. I think I've got a slide on that. And then you can have a custom tab, which we used for our code of conduct. On the sidebar, you've got links to all the things in the program. So this is where the distinction between sessions gets really weird. The sessions they have, there's main stage, which is a panel or a talk. There's breakout session, which is identical to main stage, except that you can only have one main stage thing at a time, whereas you can have parallel breakout sessions. Then there's networking, which is the kind of speed dating thing that a lot of these systems are using, where once you go into the session, you get randomly paired with someone for a one-on-one video call for like 2 minutes or something, and then it switches over to another person. We thought about using that as a kind of mixing thing, but we tested it. We did 2 test comms. We tried it at the first one, And the splash screen that comes up at the beginning was so riddled with typos that we decided we would just be embarrassed to use it. So we didn't. So that's why networking is not on the sidebar. There's also workshops, which are sessions that when you join, you're on voice and video. So that's what you would use for kind of social spaces and anything that you want to be interactive. But I'm going to talk about why that's not there as well. Then there's exhibitors, which you see the booths, which I'll show in a moment. People will show you everyone who's registered for the event. If you're down to give a talk, there's a My Talks button. And if you're using the built-in system, you go in there and you're in the backstage area, you can start broadcasting. That's all very easy in theory. And then if you're an exhibitor, you have a My Booth button, which lets you edit your booth. So in theory, all very easy. So the good things, on the back end, it's very easy to set up a new event, very easy to customize. On the front end, it automatically creates your event website and virtual event hub. But downsides, oh, this was a nightmare. So we set up this event at the end of May. At the end of June, it was like the 19th of June, it was the night before I was moving house. It suddenly blasted an email to everyone who had registered saying your event starts tomorrow. And it turns out the way they'd coded their system is to schedule that email for 1 month after you set up the event, not for the night before your event starts. I have no idea why. There was no warning to us that this was going to happen. The first we heard of it was people emailing us in a panic saying, what do you mean it starts tomorrow? I thought it was in October. The night before I was moving house. That was like the worst night of the year. It was horrible. Bad things on the front end. I mentioned the weirdness with the enter event button. That was very strange. So setting up registrations. Again, in theory, very easy. On the back end, you can customize your registration form, add custom questions. You can see some of ours there. We added a question about accessibility, about being on program, that sort of thing. You can also, so you can use the Excel events generated event website. We had our own website. So we wanted to embed the registration within our own website. And they provide a way to do that. You can set up this thing here. So this gives you tickets, and then we had our exhibitor booth add-ons, and then there's just a copy this code and it embeds as an iframe within your website. We tried that, but the form that embeds within your website is really badly formatted. It had like labels overrunning text boxes and things. It was horrible. So we didn't want to use that. But they also have a button, and you can just embed the button in your website, and that does the form as a pop-up, and that looked much better. So we did that. Excuse me. That was a bit of a nightmare though. So this is how it looked on our website. First of all, the background of our website is not white, and you can't customize the background of the button, so that annoyed me. But other than that, for anyone who's not me, that's probably not a big issue. The bigger issue is, I mean, this is a static screenshot, so you can't see it. If you actually load the page on our website, it takes a couple of seconds for this button to show up. So you sometimes get people loading it going, oh, wait, there's nothing there. And then sometimes it actually doesn't come up at all. And there's no warning that anything's gone wrong. It's just not there. So you've got click the button below, and then there's no button. So that's why I had to add this text, button not loading, try this link, and then the link takes you straight to the Excel events site. That was really annoying, and is one of the bugs we reported to Excel events that they refused to believe existed for months. We finally got to the bottom of it when we realized it happens if you have cookies disabled. So anyone in incognito mode in Chrome was having this issue. And yeah, it was really annoying that we had to figure that out ourselves, that Excel events couldn't figure out what was going on and didn't seem to care. Once you register, you get an automated email. You can customize the email to a point. You can change what's in this text. You deliberately can't read the text because it's not interesting. So you can change what appears in there. You can't change the overall layout. So the swoopy blue thing, the hi Rachel, you're ready to go, you can't change that. That's a bit annoying. You can't change the fact that the end of the email says thanks, Excel events, which is not how a British person would sign off an email. And also we didn't want it to be from Excel events. We wanted it to be from us. You can't change that. That was a bit annoying, but minor issues. At least it sends an automated email. That's nice. So good things. It was easy to create discount codes. So this is how we did our free ticket scheme. So everyone shows up as the same ticket type there, and you've just sent them a discount code to make it free. You can also have hidden ticket types. So we did that for our special guests so they could register directly. You can add custom registration fields. That's really easy. Although I will say, if you then delete a registration field, it deletes it from everyone who was previously registered. You lose that data. That's annoying. So make sure you download a spreadsheet anytime you change anything. It does send an automated confirmation email. You can attach PDF tickets, but I don't know why you would for a virtual event. You can customize it to a point. Oh, and it links to your Stripe account. So that's how you get the money. They slice their 20% off before you get it. It goes direct to you through Stripe. And then they bill you afterwards for any extra. So when it works, the registration system is straightforward. Didn't always work. I mentioned the problem with the button not always showing up. We also had multiple people reported that they got to the end of the process and then there was no confirmation. It just came up with a blank screen. It had actually gone through, but perfectly normal reaction. If you don't get a confirmation, you think this hasn't worked and you do it again. So then we would get people registering twice. And that's how we found out that if you issue a refund through the Excel Events site, they deduct the credit card charges from the customer, which is illegal in Europe. So we couldn't refund people easily. We had to go to Excel Events and ask them to do it manually every time, and it would take them days, and it was really annoying. They also never believed us, by the way, that thing of not getting the confirmation was a problem, but we had maybe a dozen people reported it. So I believe it's an issue. I couldn't replicate it, but that was annoying. And it cost us money because then we had to subsidize the credit card fees. So that was annoying. So things that could have been better. You can add exhibitor booths on as an add-on if you're charging for them, but it doesn't automatically set it up. You have to do that yourself. It doesn't take very long, but it does mean you have to close registration for new exhibitors sometime before to give you time to actually do that. Limited customization of the confirmation email. Yeah, the mandatory Excel Events branding was a bit annoying. It's all just very American. And things like the time format is American, and it's just not what we would have chosen, but not a huge deal. And very corporate, yeah. The front end just doesn't always work. The only payment methods it accepts are credit cards. Even though it's using Stripe, it will only use credit cards and debit cards. We didn't think that would be a problem because we're British. We had no idea that there are countries where card use isn't widespread. And I'm not even talking about third world countries. Germany doesn't really use cards very much. We didn't know that. So that was a bit of a problem. We ended up setting up a back channel where people could PayPal us if they wanted to. I'm not endorsing PayPal, by the way. Ask me afterwards about the time I had to sue them because they froze a convention account. The access code discount code thing. So I don't know if you noticed on the front of the registration form at the top, there's a box that says access code. An access code reveals a hidden ticket type. A discount code is a completely separate thing and is entered on the final page of the checkout process. And once you've had that explained to you, it's fine, it kind of works, but it's not intuitive. And we've just wasted so much time explaining that to people and people having problems with it. And it's just a silly way to set it up. Oh, there are some really annoying automated messages you can't change. Like if you dally too much on the registration form, it comes up with this pop-up saying, hurry, your tickets might sell out. Our tickets were unlimited. They weren't going to sell out, but it's just like annoying pressure marketing that we really didn't want to do. So the lobby, I showed you this already. Nice thing about the lobby, which I didn't show you before, is the sidebar is a live chat. Every page within the event has a live chat. I've blurred out the names, but that's from our event. The info desk, you can set up FAQs. Looking at the FAQs, you can see the kind of issues we had. Cannot see all the Excel Events site. Yeah, sometimes some pages just don't work. Sometime today, I couldn't get the login page to work. I had to use a different browser. No idea why. How do I donate? That's a nice one. I'm going to get on to why we had Zoom as an option. The biggest one. So if you go into your profile within Excel Events, many people wanted to change their name. We're not a corporate event. Lots of people don't use their real name at fan events. And lots of people, we had especially Good Omens fandom, there is a huge trans contingent. So a lot of people whose legal name might be one that they're really, really upset by seeing publicly. So obviously it's the first thing you get presented with when you log in is your profile, and you can change it. And sometimes it just doesn't work. You change your name and it doesn't stick. Or the weirdest thing, which I just don't understand from a database coding kind of point of view, is it will appear to change and then it will revert back to the previous one. So you'll like type a chat message, think everything's okay, and then your name will default back to what it was before. It's really, really strange. And then bloody time zones. So yeah, the profile information one was actually a bug we reported in May. It was one of the very first ones we spotted. And the fact that it was still an issue at our event in October, despite we put so much pressure on Excel events saying this is a GDPR issue, like it's really, really serious. They didn't take it seriously at all. So good things. Oh, I've forgotten, were there good things? Yes. Yeah, you can add a custom tab. So that's cool. We used it for the code of conduct because we wanted that to be kind of front and center as people logged in. That was nice. You can choose who can post in the main feed. I don't know why you would set it so everyone can post, because you've got chats for that. We set it so only organizers could post, so that it was like a notice board and things didn't get lost. You can customize the left-hand menu to a point. Oh, right. There was a reason I went on the tangent about how many different session types there are. So if you're just an attendee showing up and you're not familiar with the back end of this platform, you just see there's a program item and you just want to go to it. But that left-hand menu is divided up into the back end session types, and you can't change that. So we noticed at our very first TestCon, which fortunately was just a dozen of our best friends, that they would say, oh, where's this next thing? It's not coming up on the coming up next thing. And you have to say, oh, you've got to click on lobby, then click on program, then find it, click on it. It's just really annoying. So we did ask, could we just have a link to the full program in the left-hand menu? And no, apparently that's too hard. So we liked that the lobby had its own chat. That was like the central chat, and then there's different chats in different places, and then we had the info desk for FAQs. Bad things, yeah, I just said that. No way to add full program to the left-hand menu. The updating the profile, I think that's a really unacceptable bug. I'm still upset about that. The splitting the left-hand menu by session type is just really opaque if you don't understand what it's doing. There is no live technical support. So you see a thing that says info desk, but it's just a list of FAQs. There isn't a place you can go for tech support. Excel events, when you do your demo with them, will say we have 24/7 tech support, and they did an onboarding session with us where they introduced us to our customer success manager, who was going to be with us all the way through. We never heard from that person again. They do have 24/7 tech support, but it's only accessible via live chat. Sometimes you're waiting, like sometimes you get an answer within a couple of minutes. Sometimes it's half an hour, an hour. When you're running a live event, that's really not okay. There was this weird like event admin who was present like as a person within a session, which seems to be an Excel events owned account. It makes it look like there's a tech support person or an admin person you can talk to, but it's not a person. There's no one there. But that event admin account, which we knew about because we'd asked about it before, is owned by Excel events, posted random spam in our feed in the lobby of our event the day before our event. It was just like a link to a YouTube video advertising Indian butter or something. Very, very strange. So continue the tour program. So on the back end, this is where you set up your sessions and speakers. On the front end, it formats relatively nicely. So you have the time. This automatically shows your local time, which is fine if you're not using a VPN. They only added shortly before our event the time zone. It didn't say what time zone it was before, so we did have some people getting very confused that the times didn't match the times on our website. It's because it's in your local time. During the event, going to this program has a like join session button. Now that I took this screen cap after the event, it says view recording, so you go to the same page and it has now the recording of the panel. In this screenshot, you can also see at the top of the screen, we have a session where there were 2 parallel sessions. You wouldn't know that unless you happen to catch the arrow at the side of the screen. That was a big problem. That to see when there is more than one session at a time, you have to know to click the arrow to see the other sessions. That was a common complaint. So good thing, setting up the sessions and speakers was really easy. It automatically populates the program all over the site. You can add social media links to speaker profiles, which is good. And then on the speaker profile, it shows all the sessions they're speaking in. You can also link exhibitors to sessions. So if one of your speakers has a dealers table, you can link that from the session they're speaking in. You can filter the program by tags. You can set up all the tags yourselves. Users can select it to make their custom schedule. Things that weren't so great, the speaker account, like speaker names, are not linked to the user accounts. So if they change their name, it doesn't change the name of the speaker. It doesn't change their profile picture. You have to do all that yourself, which is just minor annoyance that you're having to email all these people, say, please send us a profile picture. You can't edit the speakers from the session page. You have to there's a bunch of other clicks if you want to change anything about the speaker when you're adding them to the session. That's a minor annoyance. It's not completely customizable. So the default social medias that you can add, I think, are Twitter and LinkedIn, which is great for corporate events, not so much for fan events. We wanted things like Facebook, maybe Tumblr, AO3. You can't add custom fields. You have to order the speakers in the session manually. So if you want them to appear alphabetical or whatever, you just have to do that by hand. And yeah, I said it was difficult to see parallel sessions. So exhibitor booths. We ended up making really good use of exhibitor booths. We quite liked them, but they were a bit of a nightmare. This is where you set them up. So this is the screen where you set up all the content of your booth. You can add videos, images, text, links, whatever you want. This screen, for some reason, was an absolute nightmare. You start typing and your cursor will jump back to the beginning of the text box, or it auto-saves periodically, and when it auto-saves, it deletes the last paragraph you wrote. Another one of these bugs that we reported that they didn't believe. It was really, really frustrating. We got into the habit of writing everything in a Word document and then copy-pasting it because it was just such a pain to use. We also ran into a weird issue. About a week before our event, a bunch of our booths, all the content just disappeared, and we had to write them all again from scratch. That was really annoying. But you can, on the team tab up here, you can add team members to the booth. So everyone who's booked their own booth, you just add them as a team member, and then they have access to edit it directly, so we don't have to do that. And then this is what they look like on the front end. This is some of the booths we had at our event. They all show up in a grid like this, and then you click on them, and then you have the full page, and there's different tabs and things. Every booth has its own chat, as well as the main chat here for the exhibitor hall. There's a different one for everyone. You can add tags to booths. So there were some people who were just showing art, some people who were selling merch. We also used it for activities. So where we would normally leave a board game in the lounge, we had some games that you can play online, and we made it a booth so people could look through for things to do in their own time. So good things, you can assign unlimited team members to each booth. So that was really great. We had some people who wanted to share a table for reasons that aren't entirely clear to me. You can have as many people as you want. The categories were really useful because it did get really crowded. I forget how many booths we had, lots. So being able to filter them was really good. And you can make them different sizes. So if you want some to be more prominent, you can make them bigger. You do have a different chat in each booth, which is really great. There's a Zoom integration. So this was quite well used, although I didn't see it myself. If you can embed a Zoom meeting, so it uses the browser version of Zoom, which is a bit shit, but if you're just a few people chatting, it's fine. You can also get the Zoom information and then join it through the desktop app if you want to. And so people were in their booths doing like drawing demos, running games, that kind of thing. Our charity showed up and had like meet and greet sessions where they talked about their work. That was really cool. And people reported good sales. So anecdotally, we think it worked quite well. A thing that I really enjoyed was I set up a scavenger hunt, set up as like an escape room kind of thing online. And every time I was getting a bit annoyed during the event, I just went and looked at the booth chat for that. And it just lifted my spirits so much because people who had finished it were helping other people with clues. And that was really cool. Things that weren't so great, you have to create them manually. I already mentioned that when people order a booth. You have to link to an external store. Most people already had like an Etsy or a Redbubble or something, and they were just linking to those. It was really, really buggy. Yeah, that was an absolute nightmare. Oh yeah, there's this weird thing with if you go into a booth and click on a link or download a document, you automatically show up as a lead on the back end. So the person running the booth has a page of leads, and it will automatically show your first and last names and your email address. There is no warning on the front end that that's happening and that your email address is being shared. So huge GDPR concern. There is a toggle to switch that off so it doesn't happen. When we first tried this, that toggle didn't work. We reported it. They never responded to us, but they appear to have fixed it. But it does annoy me that they recommend having not enabling that toggle so that that this information is being given to exhibitors without anyone's knowledge. I generally got this sense from Excel events that they didn't think GDPR was a thing that affected them. It's a common thing with American companies who don't seem to realize that it's not just European companies who have to worry about GDPR. It is anyone who handles data from European citizens. So if you have anyone from Europe attending your event, GDPR is a thing you need to know about. They were just not interested. They didn't care. Luckily, that got fixed before the event. Yeah, a weird thing that we didn't know about but came up in, I think it was really the only negative thing people said in feedback forms, was that when you're on the exhibitor page, people wanted to open booths in another tab. And if you right click, there wasn't an open another tab option. So that's a mild annoyance. Yeah, the back end was just very corporate. So things like having lead generations and you can rate your leads as hot and cold. If you're used to doing corporate things, that makes sense. If you're going to a fan convention, people just didn't understand what it meant and it was just a bit weird. There's default text that goes into your booth and it has like an offer 50% off everything this weekend. When you're setting up your booth, it looks like example text, but it's not. It is actually there and it shows up in your booth. So you can unknowingly announce that you're offering 50% off everything when you're not. So that's annoying. So your profile as an exhibitor is linked to your email address, which means that you can only have one name. So it will show in your booth, it says, I can't remember what the default text was because it was really corporate. We changed it to booth hosted by, and it has your name. You might want to use a different name there than elsewhere on the site. If you have if you're selling under a trade name or something, you can't do that, or you have to have 2 email addresses and be logged in 2 different browsers. So mild annoyance. Panels. So on the back end, this is how you set up your panels. Lots of choice of streaming providers. You can do YouTube, Vimeo, Wistia, which is the one I'm not familiar with. Their built-in studio or an RTMP stream. You can set up the description, link exhibitors, that sort of thing. On the front end, this is what it looks like. You have the video embedded in the session page, live chat at the side. There's also, if I move your videos out of the way, as well as the live chat, you have tabs for, in every session, there's polls. If people want to run polls during their talk, you can see the people who are in the session, and there's a Q&A tab, which was really useful for keeping questions aimed at panelists separate from the chat, which was really busy and active. So the major problem we had here was, let's do the good things first. Why not? Choice of streaming providers was really great. Having all of these options. The RTMP stream means you can basically do anything. So streaming from Zoom was fine. That's what we wanted to do for special guests for the captioning. But from the front end, which stream provider you use is invisible. They just go to the session page as normal. The video is embedded. They can't tell. You can see on the session page if there are linked exhibitors. So I had on this example, the Mercury 5 thing at the top was the booth that one of these speakers had. Every panel has its own chat, and that chat stays there for the life of the event. So it's like 30 days after the event ends. And the recordings are also available automatically, no work needed, as soon as the session ends, for 30 days afterwards. So the bad thing, so this, I mean, I've put it in as one bullet point, but this was so bad. We ran a test con a week before the event and found that the built-in studio, which we'd planned to use for everyone who was not a special guest because it needed then no input from us, didn't work for about a quarter of the speakers. Excel events tech support was useless. They told us that people's computers just weren't up to scratch. And we were like, well, this person has a gaming computer, so that's not really an acceptable answer. Some people just saw white squares instead of other panelists' videos. It was just a nightmare. Honestly, at the end of that TestCon, I just cried. It was horrible. So we had to make the decision. It's less than a week before our event. It went so horribly that we had to decide we're just not going to use their built-in studio. We had to switch everything to Zoom. And I mentioned way back at the beginning that one of the reasons that we were not going to put everyone on Zoom was there were only 2 of us. And we had 2 parallel streams for the entirety of this event running nonstop 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. And we had to do that by ourselves. We had to, every 50 minutes, we had to start a new Zoom call, get all the panelists set up, start the streaming, stop it, start the next one. It was, honestly, it worked from the front end, but it nearly killed us. Another thing that was annoying is you can't add subtitles to direct uploads or recordings. This annoys me because on the back end, what they're using for RTMP streams and for direct uploads is Mux, and Mux does allow you to add closed captions, but Excel Events hasn't built that in. I asked so many times. The only way to have closed captions is to use an external streaming service. I've already mentioned why you can't use YouTube. The only one you can use is Vimeo. The only way you can use Vimeo for live streaming is to have their top level premium account, which you can only do on an annual basis. So that instantly adds about $1,000 to your costs. So we were not able to do that. On the front end, so for the most part, people were positive about the Excel Events experience on the front end, which actually annoyed me. But no, it's good. I wanted everyone to have a really good experience, especially the amount of work we put in. But yeah, I hated it when people going on Twitter saying they loved Excel Events. The only real complaint we had was that people did report the video lagging anytime the live chat got busy. So basically, anytime Neil Gaiman said anything particularly exciting, the live chat was going, oh my God. And then the video would lag. And right at the end of panels, when everyone's jumping in to say thank you, then the video would lag again. I didn't see that because I was on Zoom. But yeah, people reported that being annoying. At least having the recording there, though, meant no one was particularly upset by it because they all knew they'd be able to go and see it again afterwards. Variable delays in the live stream is a thing I've not come across before. So the only real live streaming I've done before is I run a series of astronomy events, which we have speakers in Zoom and we live stream to YouTube. And we know that there's a lag there. It's about 20 seconds. We've got used to working with that. A thing I've never encountered before is everyone watching has a different lag. And so this makes it very difficult if you're doing anything interactive. You basically can't do anything interactive. Q&A is fine because you've got kind of built-in delay there anyway, but that's it. Social spaces. Oh, this was the other nightmare. So I mentioned the built-in studio not working. That was nothing compared to the workshops. I said I was going to mention why workshops was not an option on that menu. It's because it just doesn't work. When we did our TestCon, I kept getting kicked out. And again, Excel Events were telling me, oh, it's just because I don't have a good enough computer. I had a week-old iMac with 10 cores. There's no way my computer was at fault. If it is, then your product is not a consumer product. So again, we had to make a decision a few days out to completely abandon workshops in favor of Zoom, which worked. We know how to do Zoom, but meant that it was no longer all within one portal, which was annoying. I'm now going to race because I'm running out of time. I knew I was covering too much. So we ended up having to set up our lounge via an exhibitor booth. We did put it at the top. People still struggled to find it. We had instructions here. You had to be on the latest version of Zoom to be able to move between breakout rooms. And then we had a whole bunch of different breakout rooms set up. Some had scheduled games in them. Some you could just grab a group of friends or just pop in and chat. So nothing went well. Hopefully, though, on the front end, people didn't realize that we didn't intend to use Zoom all along. So yeah, that was just dreadful. People not being able to find the lounge, it being separate was not great. You can't do it as an embedded Zoom within the exhibitor booth because then you don't have breakout rooms because it's the browser version. So that was annoying. And the biggest problem was people not being on version 5.3. So over and over again, have you upgraded Zoom? Yes. Are you sure? No. That was fun. Yes, thanks so much to Tifo, who I believe is here, who did an awful lot of that wrangling for us. So I wanted to give just a few hints and tips about doing social things in Zoom, because we've done it a lot now. It is actually great for social spaces, especially now that people can move between breakout rooms. We had a PowerPoint slide shared in the main room with instructions, how to upgrade Zoom, how to move between breakout rooms. But one thing that we've been trying to do with all our events is being aware that there are different levels of anxiety about social spaces. Some people are quite happy to just charge into a room and chat. Other people would rather keep their voice and video off, but still want something interactive to do. So some of the things that we have had really good results with are here. Kahoot is a well-known one, great for doing quizzes. People play along on their phones. They don't necessarily have to be talking, but they're still joining in. Jackbox is really good. We particularly like Quiplash 2 and Drawful 2, which are both part of Jackbox, because you can set custom prompts, so it's really good for themed conventions. Playingcards.io is great. It's just a tabletop simulator, so you can set up whatever game you want. We did a custom version of Taboo using All Good Omens things. Have to admit, I have not played Among Us, but a bunch of people played it during the convention and it's really popular, so that was great. And then the final one I have there is Cards Against Humanity. We set up our own version called Cards Against Armageddon, uploaded it to a site called Pictures Against Humanity. You can upload custom card decks and then just give people the links and how to find your deck, and they can play it on their own. All of those resources are on our website. I've also got lots of links to like PowerPoint templates for doing TV game shows and that sort of thing. So like those kinds of games are really good for helping the people who are a bit anxious and don't necessarily want to be on voice and video. Oh, sorry, I just moved my videos. Okay, so overall summary, what we learned. The main thing that surprised me was like an unknown was that people are way more confused about time zones than you think they're going to be. I guess I was blasé about it because I've done a lot of international collaborations, but yeah, that was way more confusing than I thought anyone would find it. It's good to have volunteers from a range of time zones, so you've got people covering the overnight your time. Time zones do make scheduling difficult. We had some panels that had one person in America, one in Europe, and one in the Philippines, and there'll be like exactly 1 hour that panel can be scheduled. That was really fun. No one reads instructions. This is true for physical events as well, but at least at a physical event, you could like stand in front of them. For this, no one reads instructions. Have you upgraded Zoom? Really, it was like the big box at the top of our final. If you read nothing else, read this email before the event. Still no one did it. That's not true. Lots of people did. Schedule breaks. So we didn't, because we wanted to pack in as much as we could during the hours we were awake, on the basis that no one had to watch anything live. They could come back, like watch the things that they'd missed later. People don't want to do that. There's this FOMO. I have to watch everything live or I might miss something. And so then people overexert themselves and they really need a break. So just schedule the breaks anyway. If we had known we would be running everything through Zoom, of course, we would have scheduled breaks for our own sanity. We didn't. Pre-record your opening ceremony. So we did this out of necessity because we wanted it to be subtitled and we didn't want to pay £200 to subtitle it. So we pre-recorded it the day before, subtitled it ourselves. It was great though, because it meant during that first hour of the convention, we were there able to provide tech support, help people who were struggling to log in, all that kind of thing. So that was really good. You do need live tech support. It was the two of us. It was really hard. And Tifo, thank you so much. It was, yeah, you need people who are just there answering the, I can't log in, I can't find the Zoom, that kind of thing. It's, yeah, too many people. So in summary, we are really pro virtual comms. It opened it up to so many people who would never otherwise have been able to attend. We also, frankly, cannot afford Neil Gaiman at a physical event, and he never would have agreed to come if he'd had to travel somewhere. So it is great. It does present issues, time zones, payment methods, language barriers. That's another reason to have subtitles besides the accessibility issue. It just needs a bit of thought in advance. And it is possible to create the feeling of a physical convention with interactivity if you work at it. We do, though, this is my call to action to like the industry, please give us a better option for subtitling. This is the main thing that I think people are struggling with now. So I'm just going to leave you with an image of our setup. This is how we ran our convention from our dining room table so that we could hardwire into our router with a big computer, 2 laptops. That's how we ran a convention for 661 people from Milton Keynes. So Thank you very much. I'm really sorry for going long. That was really long.
That was great. Thank you so much. And okay, Steve, are you ready? We'll turn it over to you.
Okay. I'm ready. If people can hear me, just give me a heads up that I'm okay. Steve Davidson, I'm the publisher of Amazing Stories. I'm talking to you today without any teeth for various reasons, but I'm more intelligible than with the teeth. So we'll just have to deal. Rachel, I was extremely impressed with everything that you had to say and presented. I've been taking notes, and really the big thought in my head is, gee, I'd really like to bring you on board to run Amazing Con too. So along those lines, at some point, I would like to talk to you about your experiences and the technologies and whatnot that you use for your event, if that would be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Get in touch.
Wonderful. My presentation is also not nearly as sophisticated as Rachel's is. I don't have the accent, so I apologize in advance if this is a little bit of a letdown after what a great presentation that we just saw. I'm here today to talk about the ad hoc emergency methodology I used to schedule what turned out to be a fairly complicated 3-day multi-track convention in approximately 5 weeks. And I don't know what anybody's experience with scheduling a convention is, but if you notice, if you've ever been invited to be on a panel, that work probably begins in general about a year before the actual convention, maybe 9 months before the convention, when everybody who did it the previous year has had a chance to recover and then start the engines up all over again. I'm having a little trouble with the echo here on my headphones. So the genesis of Amazing Con is this. The pandemic began, the lockdown started. Some people were talking about getting online and doing various things via a variety of different services. And I suddenly said to my people one day, why don't we put together a series of readings? Lord knows we have enough authors, and they're always looking for an opportunity to get themselves out there. And why don't we just schedule like a few back-to-back readings and see how it goes? And everybody was keen on that. So I got in touch with all the authors, both those who contribute to the website and who have appeared in the magazine. And I got back a couple, yeah, sounds good. And 24 hours later, I had close to 70 people wanting to do readings. At that point, I said, you know, we really need to think about this a little bit more. And within a handful of days, it became apparent that we needed to put together an entire multi-day convention. We had originally been scheduled for May. We pushed it off by about 5 weeks to June timeframe, and then the work began. And I had done scheduling for a few conventions. I was the first scheduler, program head for the Heinlein Centennial Convention, a task I had to give up. And I have a lot of years of experience scheduling paintball tournaments, which, if you can believe it, are in a lot of respects more complicated than convention event scheduling. Oh, I just lost myself here. What's going on? There we go. So I had to figure out a quick way because I did not have time to learn scheduling software or to use tools that I was unfamiliar with. I had to figure out a quick way to determine how to put the schedule together for the event. And what I ended up doing was using spreadsheet and color coding and some very, very specific questions to the people who are going to participate in the programming. To give you an example, I'm going to show you a screen now of I thought I was going to, scheduling format. Can you all see this spreadsheet with red, yellow, and green bars? Okay. Let me refer to my notes because I'm kind of drifting a little bit here. So back up. I had a very short time frame to do this, and I had far more people involved than I had originally intended. And for me, visualization was the key to being able to schedule everybody in, not have any overlaps, give people time between their panels or their readings, and put together a schedule that kind of flowed and had some interest for everybody. So what I did was, the first question was, who wants to do a reading? And most importantly, tell me what your preferences are for days of the convention, be it first preference, second preference, third preference, and then any particular times that you won't be available. And the way that translated on the screen was, first preference was green, color-coded, second preference yellow, and third preference red, with blank spaces showing when a particular individual was not available. And it was simply a question of plugging in, as you can see in the illustration here, X's for a particular panelist at a particular time on a particular day. The next thing that we went to was, well, let's add some panels. Okay. So the next question that went out to everybody was, and this is unusual, usually conventions set themselves up with a group of con runners figuring out what kind of subjects they'd like to have on their panels. Sometimes it involves soliciting external people, but at some point it goes out to a list of guests. Usually we like you to appear on this panel, and this panel. And they ask you for conflicts or whatever. I kind of inverted that again as a time-saving measure. Give me one or two panel subjects that you would like to participate on to all of the potential participants. I got that information back in within 48 hours and plotted it the same way that I had plotted the readings, by marrying up the restrictions and preferences and time frames. What was nice about using this quick methodology was that with all the X's populating the screen, you could look across a row to see where somebody was scheduled, and you could look down a column for a particular time frame, and almost instantly potential conflict was revealed by showing too many X's in a particular time slot. I did not, fortunately, I really lucked out, but I was reminded, I should say, of the one trick that's essential to doing scheduling for these kinds of things with any type of tools, and that is scheduling the most restricted people first. The ones that have the most conflicts, the smallest windows of availability, those are the people who you plug into the schedule first, and then you work everything else around it. I was discussing this, interestingly enough, with my mother the other day, and she is an educator. And she said, "Oh yes, that's exactly like English as a second language students. Whenever we did the annual class schedule, the first people that we scheduled were the ones for English as a second language because that had such a restricted availability." So it's a similar kind of thing, and I'm sure that it's a little trick that once you remember it, it makes complete sense. In terms of, I'm trying to figure out how to show you guys a different screen here. So if you give me a second, I will try and pull that up. Now I'm not seeing. Okay, I can't do that. I set up tabs in my browser for different pictures, Jay. And but if I switch over, I don't have the option to display a different tab. Any suggestions?
If you share and then you choose the first option, which is your desktop, then you can go between tabs. So unshare it and then reshare using the desktop option.
Okay. Well, right now I'm totally lost. New share? No, I want to unshare, so I don't want to share. I want to turn that off. How am I doing that?
Yes, or you could share.
Got it.
And sharing the screen.
Okay. So now I change to the tab I want, and then change, and then share again.
That's one way of doing it. Or the first box that comes up is your desktop box, and that'll allow you to.
You know, when I go to share, I get maybe that's it. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. Okay. This is the schedule at a glance, just to give you some idea of what the eventual final product was. We had 2 separate rooms for readings. We needed it owing to time restrictions and availability. We had 2 panel rooms. We had 1 room for ongoing workshop, multi-hour, I think it was 6-hour each presentations, and then some externally linked to events, which ended up basically being 7 tracks of programming. As I said, I'm not nearly as prepared as Rachel was. And that's pretty much it on this little tool that I created. Just using the visualization and the colors to put things together in a very short time frame. So I figured that questions would be more in order than simply just presenting that kind of a thing. The event was advertised for about 2 months. We ended up with a bit over 200 participants, which I consider to be pretty decent for our first time out. We ran into technical issues as like were previously described, and our back-end people were driven crazy, especially considering the fact that I was not able to actually get into my own event. So we had basically 2 people pretty much running all 7 rooms, which was a nightmare for them, but it was doable. And at the end of the conclusion, most of the attendees said that they had not noticed that there were any real issues. We had some few delays. We did not have closed captioning, which is definitely something that we're looking into for our next event. I've done some looking into having sign language folks appear to do instantaneous. That looks like it's probably going to be cost prohibitive. And the other issue that we're dealing with for AmazingCon 2 is that it's going to be multi-language. We're going to have several Spanish language tracks, maybe a Chinese language track in addition to English, and others are banging on the door. So that's pretty much, sorry that it's not nearly as sophisticated as what you all were presented before, but it's just a simple little spreadsheet tool with color coding to help visualize what's going on with your convention programming. And I would be happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Hello, this is Peter Ushevka. So you mentioned that the next Amazing Con, will be bigger with extra tracks for other languages. Are you thinking, and it sounds like there's a lot more time to plan it, are you thinking that you'll probably use a more formal scheduling tool rather than just a spreadsheet?
I'm hoping to pass the entirety of scheduling off to somebody else. And I'm actively looking for volunteers. This is a traditional style convention. We're looking for fans who do and have done live conventions to come on board and participate in helping to run the convention as is customary. So I have feelers out. I have other people that I've been talking to. Right now I think it's 5 different people developing separate tracks of programming, which is how I chose to approach things the second time around. So I have one group of people who are working on fan and fan history based programming. I have my Spanish language editor who is working with a couple of authors on the Spanish language programming. I have an author, an indie author who is working on indie authoring related programming tracks. And then I've got a couple of folks with the magazine who are working on the readings and copy clutches and stuff like that. And we will be using more formal scheduling tools in order to chart everything.
Steve, what was your attendance like?
We had, I think, all told, it was 217 or something like that, and the most online at any one given time was 201.
And were you charging?
No, and thank you for reminding me. Our model was based on a couple of things, which included the fact that we did not want to annoy people during the pandemic who were looking for things to do by asking for a membership fee. What we did do was offer free membership. For security purposes, we had to have everybody who was going to attend register so that we had an email address for them, etc., and that we could pass the passwords and access codes to get into the event in a controlled fashion. But what we did do was set it up so that it was free, and if you wanted to donate something to the convention, you were free to do so. And on average, we ended up taking in per person like a $35 entry fee. Most people didn't, but the folks who did support it paid well more than $25 or $50 to do so. And I think, with rare exception, given the budget that I'm looking at right now, we're pretty confident that we will cover our expense budget for the second convention if we maintain that free with donation type of a structure.
So Steve, are you enabling your website to be multilingual?
The website, which website, for the convention or for the existing Amazing Stories website?
Mainly convention, but both.
I'm not sure exactly how that's going to be handled. I'm taking suggestions and information in from people, so I don't know exactly how we're going to handle that at this point in time. I want to try to do it though, and for me, wanting to try to do it is an exercise in jumping in and figuring out how we're going to do it, rather than targeting a specific methodology.
I'm in the same situation with this site. I know there's a WordPress plugin I should be using, and that's something to do in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, all the many bells and whistles, we were entirely on Zoom with video capture of the sessions, which I have been painfully converting to put up on YouTube. A lot of this stuff that has become available or is known to be available is relatively new, and more power to folks like Rachel who are going and doing the research of what is out there and diving into who can handle what for various services. But the intention is to stream on Facebook or YouTube or as many different platforms as we're able to get it out there through in future.
Steve, thank you very much for raising the spreadsheet-based system as an option. Jay, I'm going to suggest that scheduling is probably a topic that you could devote an entire day to, because there are so many nuances ranging from simplicity to complexity. So what Steve did works well for a small fan-based convention, but it's inherently not scalable, even if you use collaborative tools like Google Docs, so that multiple people can be working on program at the same time. It's inherently not scalable. And
right.
As soon as you get to something the size of WorldCon, then you are into the domain of something quite a bit bigger, something much more complex, but also something that has a commercial base. And for WorldCon, we used Grenadine.
Yep.
Henry has turned his camera off because he has a scheduling conflict where I think he's attending 2 conventions right now. He mentioned to me privately that there was another one on punctuation. So
Grenadine was what I had specifically in mind, and the learning curve for me was just going to be too long for the time frame that I had available.
Yeah. Well, then there's another system. So in order to give him an opportunity to mention it, Peter O has been working on a system that is, sort of a lower tier and open sourced, and therefore more inherently available on Fanbase, but potentially less sophisticated than Grenadine is, which has a large engine behind it, working to create it, and is infinitely scalable. So this whole question of what tools you use, I think is worthy of further exploration.
Great. This is the sort of thing I don't know, and love other people. So if you could put whatever you know about scheduling systems into the discussion group, we've got a topic for discussions.
So one thing I want to mention about that is that the software that you're currently using for this discussion group wouldn't let me paste a URL. Really? I wanted to paste a URL to my software.
Did you do it in discussion or in the feed?
That's in the forum before things started.
Yeah. Okay. That's good time. I'll share my screen and we'll 1 sec.
Yeah, you could use the customer support method of the previous the Excel events and just say it's not a problem. It's a feature.
Jay is, I think, the antithesis of Excel events here.
Okay, so
it's now.
Let's see. Groups, my groups. Yeah, I mean, this is new to me too. Okay, scheduling systems. Yeah, so this is the feed, but we want a discussion and test and well,
Though, are you logged in as an administrator or a regular user?
administrator, but a regular user should be able to do it too.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, there he is.
Okay.
And I could just log out
Discussions.
and do as a regular user.
Okay.
I'll just do here. Discussions. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's a bit confusing and something I need to learn to do because of the feed of this group being able to post something directly. I want to turn that off.
Okay. And I'm not an admin, and I was able to just send a link to the YouTube session to Peter. Just seems like it's working.
I'm going to grab another piece of scheduling that we schedule participants for the panels, but scheduling all of your resources is another big hairball. And if you've got, it's harder in real-time thing, but if you have specific assistants that need to work with some participants, or if you have so many Zoom sessions or whatever, if you're doing some things versus webinars versus meetings, figuring all of that in there, staff to cover things. It's okay if you've only got 2 or 3 people, but then you burn out those 2 or 3 people.
Yep.
And it's not as much of a problem necessarily as getting your participants on the right panels, but getting your support staff in there will bite you.
Scheduling of prerequisites and co-requisites and making sure that there are hard linkages and soft linkages.
Yeah.
What we did for Worldcon, where we were completely shooting in the dark and we knew we had all these requirements, but we didn't know, there was no history for us to go on. So we're very much feeling as we went, is we set up multiple layers. So programming was all being scheduled in Grenadine. That was fairly well understood, and Grenadine came out of a need to develop a large-scale multi-track scheduling system for Worldcon. So that was right on topic. We knew we were going to have a problem with international scheduling of resources, people, and particularly across time zones, the time zone thing again. We did a lot of research and then used a tool called When I Work, which, whilst not perfect, actually would have done a really good job had it not been for 2 major things, one of which was people's refusal to buy into the system. Unless you've got a scheduling system for whatever, resources or tracks or whatever, if everybody doesn't buy into it, it falls apart really quickly. The other part was simply people not having enough time to get to understand how the tool worked. And there's always learning curve involved in any of these things. So we had a number of scheduling approaches like that, depending on what the tasking was. And some of it was driven by spreadsheets. A lot of it was driven by tools that were relatively robust and absolutely scalable. That's got to be the target.
The inspiration to go back to that came actually from the first Worldcon that I worked on, which was SunCon in '77. So as you can imagine, no computers involved whatsoever. The closest we came to electronics was an IBM Selectric typewriter. And everything was laid out essentially on a whiteboard with a grid and markers that were moved around to accommodate various considerations. So it also didn't help that when we got to the hotel, we had to move rooms because some of them were unusable, but that's a different part of the scheduling issue. What do you do when the scheduling doesn't apply to the physical plant?
Well, but in fact, that can be where some of the tools that are more advanced in a spreadsheet can help you.
Oh, sure.
Because as an example, Zambia, which is the scheduling software that I'm the architect for, has an integration with Canopus, and Canopus is another open source tool that's used for publishing the schedule. And so with those two, it's possible to take an item on the schedule and change what room it's in, and that will be on everybody's phone in 5 minutes. And so the same would be true for Grenadine and probably almost many of the tools out there that would give you that ability.
Well, Steve mentioned a good one, and it's come up with Rachel's discussion also, of learning curves. That a lot of these things are complex, and we are used to sitting down and just doing something with, if you use Word a lot, you just sit down and you do things. But that's because you've already learned how to use it. And you've kind of gotten the idea of how it works. With anything like I've used Zambia a little bit, I've used Grenadine a bit, I've poked at a lot of things, but unless you have the time to learn how to use them, you're going to get frustrated. And sometimes falling back to the spreadsheet is the answer, because it'll do what you need when you need it right now, and you can move on from that. But
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm not advocating this as a solution to convention scheduling around the world. This is just an example of what was used in a very short, specific circumstance situation, tiny little tool that I came up with based on prior experience with a variety of different things that worked for me in this particular circumstance. And it may be that it could be used in similar circumstances. It's just added to the knowledge set of ways that you can go about accomplishing these kinds of things.
Exactly. And it's kind of partly where I was going, that if it works for you, that's great. And if it works for me, that's great. But when you start to move into the more complex things, you need the more complex tool. And now you need to learn how to use the more complex tool, because a word processor is not a typewriter. Right. If you're doing one letter to somebody, typewriter might be fine. If you're doing thousands of customized ones, it is no longer fine, but you have to learn how to use the word processor.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, Sibang. I was just saying it's just a matter of what tools people are familiar with and what they get most productivity out of. And it also depends on the size and the complexity of the convention. If your convention is small enough and you get a lot of productivity out of using spreadsheets, then fine, go with it. It's just a matter of what you can work with to get the job done for you in the least effort for what you need.
Going with that theme, it really doesn't matter so long as the attendees are happy with the event and didn't see any of the behind the curtain stuff.
Yes, Steve, but the other issue is you don't want to burn out the people working on the event as well. If they have to run around like crazy at the back end, even if the attendees don't see that, then the next time you're doing it, you're going to have.
You're not going to have. Right. No, absolutely. And I took this on so that my people who are working on the magazine and on the books and whatnot that we had coming out did not have to add that kind of thing to their schedules. So, no, absolutely. I've worked on a ton of conventions, been on my feet for 2.5 days straight, helping to keep conventions running, events running, and it's not something that you do lightly. If you have any experience with it, it's not something that you do lightly to the people who are volunteering to work on a convention.
Steve, what you're describing there is another scheduling aspect that is inherently unscalable, which is as you grow the size of the convention, the number of people involved gets bigger. And then there comes a point at which it can go from relatively flat and tossing things across the transom to somebody you know will pick it up, to a hierarchical structure where you actually have divisions and managers and subgroups, and you can't trust that any of that will happen. And one of the assumptions that we made very early about Worldcon, because of the size, was that a massive amount of activity is going to be driven by education and training on systems. And one of my early architectural proposals was that we actually centralize training with a group. Again, that worked to a greater or lesser extent. We did actually have somebody who was responsible for training. What we didn't want was everybody to be going off and trying to run their own training on subsystems. We wanted to coordinate that to get as much efficiency as we could. Again, it worked to a greater or lesser extent. A lot of people were going, mine, and were desperate to keep control of something, whether that was the right thing to do for the convention or not. And that disabled a lot of the efficiencies. So, you know, I'd be looking, there's a point at which things become inherently unscalable, and that's the point at which you need to be scared. And this is exactly what Rachel mentioned any number of times in her presentation. There were two people, and that was inherently unscalable with the time frame they had.
Right. And they would not want to do it that way again.
You learn.
Although,
Yeah.
I do actually have a question though, because you're talking about learning curves. So a thing that I didn't have time to get onto is what would we do next time? Because I do think that conventions need to go hybrid, even when we're not staying virtual. And I'm totally on board with that. Obviously, I'm not going back to Excel events. So what am I doing? So I'm currently working on my own system. Anyone who has ever looked at the IneffableCon website will know that I write all my websites by hand in PHP and CSS, and that's clearly not going to work if I'm trying to build an Excel events replica that actually works. So what I've been doing the last few weeks is learning WordPress. And the big stumbling block I've come across, there are lots of events plugins, lots of which have incorporated virtual things. None of them seem to be able to handle parallel program streams, which every fan convention has. So I don't know. I'm very new to this. I've never used WordPress before. Is this a thing anyone else knows about?
Not that specific question, but I will tell you that I have the resources to maybe get you a really good answer.
There are.
So the conference, the conference program I'm using does parallel streams.
Which one are you using, Jay?
What's it? It's literally conference plugin. I've got an overview. 1 sec.
Okay.
You run into some of the standard WordPress problems that a lot of plugins were written once and not maintained, or they were written for a specific purpose which is not quite yours and can't readily be modified to do it. Or just, I mean, we ran into this with Conzealand, setting up stuff for that. I was not involved with the WordPress side. I just listened. That you'd find things that worked up to 100 users and then ran out of steam just because of the way they were designed.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you tools like Grendian, which I've been involved with, and I don't know, Peter can talk to Sambia, where you do the scheduling, you can also embed the schedule in another site. So you can embed the schedule in a WordPress site, which is what some cons have done in the past as well.
Yeah, Canopus would readily embed. But yeah, Canopus is just a tool for displaying the schedule of a convention.
I presume, Rachel, you want a tool that not just to display the schedule, but to take you to like a session detail page as embed.
Yeah,
and
so
chat
I
and all that
need
other stuff.
a separate page or like a custom post type or whatever. I'm learning WordPress lingo for every session, so that you can embed a different video in every session. And what I found from a lot of the events plugins that exist is they think an event is just one thing and you can embed one Zoom meeting or one YouTube video. And I'm like, no, I've got hundreds. And finding one where you can create a custom session page and have it display nicely, I haven't found a single plugin that will do that. And I'm still researching.
I just put in the chat the plugin I'm using.
Perfect,
And
thank you.
yeah, it does make pages, but the pages are sort of buggy. And I've invited the guy to come and talk. He hasn't responded yet. And BuddyPress also has other features which maybe in their theme would work better. Definitely embed in Zoom.
I was looking earlier at Eventon, I think, which is nice because it has the embedding the video thing, but it does think that a video is a whole event. So I was wondering if you can do some fiddling with that by setting an event type and having essentially every session within your conference be an event. And I haven't quite figured out how you display that. I don't really know how this works.
There's also, go ahead.
I was going to say that part of it's also terminology. So when you talk to some professional event planners or conference planners, they talk about at a conference they have multiple events, and some people say conference is an event, and at an event they have multiple sessions. So it's sometimes when people say event, they're thinking about the whole thing, and sometimes they're thinking just about the session within the overall conference. And I don't know the plugins in WordPress, but maybe some of them are talking different terminology there, which may be the issue as well.
There's also a bit of just a technology thing that if you're trying to embed a RTMP stream display versus embedding a Zoom meeting, or some other technology. By the way, I currently recommend against WebRTC for anything because it seems to be still way heavy on resources compared to the other things. Rachel, you might reach out to the folks that did NorwestCon a couple months ago, because they set up, okay, it was a little hacky, but four simultaneous streams displaying on web pages. They did something to block just lifting the URLs out and running them yourself. And what is, sorry, another technology thing, that they did Zoom meetings that were then bopped into streams and then used Discord separately as the chat session. And they actually had them side by side on the screen. So there might be something you can steal out of that.
Thanks, I will look into that. Yeah, I was thinking for the video streaming, just using Vimeo, because they've got that figured out, and I'm not about to try and set up a media streaming service. I did look into Mux, which Excel events use on the back end, very reasonably priced, and it's all accessed through API, so it's quite easy to set up your RTMP URLs and everything, and then it automatically converts to a recording. So might look into using that, but I'm just thinking Vimeo because it's
the streaming services are almost interchangeable at this point. I mean, Muck, or I refer to them as UTwitch sometimes. That Vimeo, there's one called Uscreen, which is another thing. Although I think it front ends Vimeo, but that almost just becomes the mechanics. That becomes syntax instead of semantics.
They, not WesterCon, but one of the recent conventions worked with, maybe it was the WorldCon, worked with the Fantasy Network and Recursor TV to do streaming.
That was Conzealand.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to really see too much of that. From what I've seen and heard, it appeared to work fairly well. We're working with those folks on a variety of different things. And they are actually, earlier I forgot to mention, they're one of the other track people who are handling media stuff for Amazing Con too. So they might be a resource to look into as well. And if somebody wants to get in touch with them, I'll be happy to provide the information.
So an interesting issue we ran into with the 3D Con. We had a presenter who was going to show all stereoscopic pictures which had nudity, which YouTube would have cut off the stream. So actually had to change what the presenter was going to show.
Right.
So totally different talk.
Well, we lost the video feed from one of the Hugo presentations because of AI and intellectual property concerns a couple of years ago. So.
Yeah.
And actually, I just heard an interesting piece there. IP and recording things. That this is another one of those little check boxes for tracking stuff. Is will the presenters allow their stuff to be recorded? Will they allow? What is their audience expectation? That for most most small conventions, this is never a problem. In person, it's seldom a problem, but there were a few of them with WorldCons and some other ones where the presenter said, "Do not record my session," or "Do not stream it outside of this closed environment," and you end up having to ask the question and track it.
We got releases from everybody doing presentations. Our problem was that folks not being all that familiar with Zoom. Non-presenters frequently appeared on the main screen from whom we did not have releases. So I had to either edit those portions out of the videos that have now gone up and are archived, or get in touch and seek a release from the attendees as well as the presenters. So yeah, it is a potential issue.
The one that was mentioned, and I'm kind of making up an example because it's easier, is that people from Disney are generally not allowed to present anything to anyone. And I went to a presentation last year by somebody at Disney who had permission to give the presentation and show their pictures, but not to have the presentation recorded. And in fact, twice he had to say to people out in the audience that had cameras up, "No, put it away, no recording." Nothing can stop somebody from recording it at home because it's electronic, but if you get the appearance of saying don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did have an advantage over Conzealand in that we were always virtual. So obviously anyone signing up to be on a panel, there was a default, you agree that your session will be recorded and available on demand for 30 days after the event. That's a completely separate thing to being available outside of that community. So then separately, we had if you are cool with being out there publicly, great, let us know and we'll put your video on YouTube so other people can see it. And a decent number of people did that, but not everyone. And we had minors in some videos, so we didn't even want to go there. But I had a point that I've forgotten, so you carry on.
I was going to say that we had a range of that at the 3D convention, where our keynote wanted to be we didn't want to be recorded, because he had slides that were going to be in a book, so he didn't want to compromise that. And so we had to definitely message that to people so that they could show up live and not rely on the recorded streams. We also had a 3D theater portion of it, which was running on YouTube in both the anaglyph and the side-by-side format for 3D TVs. And all of the submissions for the different short films for that was a whole other range of legalities as far as what, like for festivals, where you have festival rights to do whatever, and with music also, which is going to be on YouTube. Sometimes your video can get flagged, and it might end up knocking off the whole stream, like the whole block of movies, rather than just that movie. So we dealt with that as well. We also had an academic symposium of people talking about historical stereoscopic topics, and there were 10 different speakers, including the one guy who was the keynote, who also didn't want to be recorded for that. But also, I think if you speak on YouTube, then maybe in some circles it's considered publishing your paper somehow. So there's another kind of, luckily everyone else gave their permission to put them there, but that was another wrinkle that we hadn't thought of before the convention.
I remembered what my point was. The one worry we had, obviously you can set up a system where people can't share the direct link and people can't download the video, but there is no physical way to stop people screen recording. So we just had it very front and center in our code of conduct. That is a breach of code of conduct to screen record. People still did it. People have said to my face that they've done it, which really pisses me off. But yeah, you just have to have it as a code of conduct thing. I think that's the most people can do.
So we've had some requests to take a break, but it looks like the next speaker isn't here yet. So the next half hour might be a break. We'll see if he shows up.
Well, thanks for attending.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
I'm going to model my next presentation on Rachel's.
I should have said Bethany made the slides. I just added text in afterwards.
On Bethany.
I was giving a talk at a whole other convention yesterday, so I just didn't have time.
Well,
that's very good delegating. That's inherently scalable.
I think two T-shirt designs are going to come out of this. One is Rachel's "That's Annoying," and it's scalable. It's inherently scalable.
Well, actually, taking that as an interesting segue, just as something that I was thinking about earlier, that for scheduling and virtual stuff, there's a wonderful phrase, but probably at least half of you know it, called shooting ratio. And it's the amount of time you spend, or the amount of film video you shoot to get an hour of presentation. And a lot of people, with the real-time thing, you spend an hour doing it. You maybe spend some time prepping, I hope. You spend an hour doing it, and you're done. And convincing people that, oh, you want to do the opening ceremony is pre-recorded and it's a half hour. Fine. Plan on spending 10 or 15 hours doing it. Oh, but it's only a half hour. And it's going to take you 10 or 15 hours to get it looking the way you want it. Just live with that. It's going to happen. And sometimes knocking that into people's heads that, the fact that you're not physical doesn't make it any easier and makes it harder in some ways. Plan for it.
Yeah, so I was a huge proponent